I would like to say that we heard a lot of things about what to change in the United Nations. And some pathways were laid out. But what actually we circumvented in thinking of the possible future of the UN is the fundamental tool that we have before us, which is the Charter of the United Nations. Whatever ideas you might have, and we have quite a lot of ideas about how to move ahead and solve problems, at the end of the day, you will actually face yourself to what the Charter back in 1945 laid out as the fundamental way of the functioning of the United Nations. Today, the world has changed dramatically, as we all know. It's a very turbulent world today, and we still have the same Charter of the United Nations back in 1945. At the beginning of the existence of this organization, we had a Security Council which was established, which represented 8% of the full membership of the United Nations, which is to say 5 permanents, 5 non-permanents. Today, the Security Council represents 22% of the Security Council membership. That it goes back to 1945, and today it goes back to 8% with the number of members, 193 member states in the United Nations. This discrepancy with the world actually emerged quite earlier than the basic geopolitical change that we witnessed in the end of the 80s, where in the 60s we changed the composition of the Security Council to reflect, in a way, as they said at that time, the realities of the world, which it was to say that instead of the 5 non-permanents, we will have altogether 15 members in the Security Council, which is to say 10 non-permanents and 5 permanents. This was obviously a bold step, if I might say, in the height of the Cold War, to move ahead. As time went by, and we can see today when there is a meeting, at the high-level meeting at the UN, and also other meetings at the UN, the question of the reform, and that's the key word, the reform of the United Nations came very forcefully on the table. Today, everybody who takes the floor, including the permanent members, speak about the necessity of changing the composition of the United Nations, most of all, obviously, the Security Council. How to say this is another matter. When I speak about the critical voices on the composition of the Security Council, I can also include the permanent members themselves, though they never came up, actually, with a relevant list of what we should do. Perhaps with the only exception, some 20 years ago, by the US delegation at the United Nations. Because the issue was, if there is a change to be done in the Security Council, who those countries should be. What would be the requirements for countries out of 193 countries to become permanent members? And then when it came to the United States, as I say, 2 decades ago, they laid out some kind of a list of requirements. First of all, what is the GDP of the given possible future member? The commitment of that country to human rights, and the participation of this country in the fight against terrorism, and the military capabilities of that country can also obviously be taken into account. So these were those, if you will, requirements that stayed since that time alone hanging in the air, because if it's true that the permanents would say, yes, we should change the number of the permanents, but how and who is not clear. At the same time, since we are 193 countries, others came out forcefully as far as the composition of the Security Council. At the very beginning, some time ago, already four countries, the G4 came out forcefully to say that they want to become permanent members of the Security Council. Japan, Brazil, Germany, and Japan and India. These are the four countries. Again, today we are 2025. This still is, hanging in the air. No steps taken ahead. By the way, the African countries and the African Union also very forcefully demanded that Africa should also have a seat, or even 2 seats in the Security Council. Since that time, this has become a focus of each and every delegation, looking at how the United Nations works today. Now, if we want to solve all these problems that we heard this morning and today, we have to look at the Security Council the way it is laid out in the Charter of the United Nations. This obviously a very complicated issue, which is related to the Charter itself. We have to change the Charter if we want to change the Security Council. And there are less complicated and very simple issues that are also hanging in the air, which do not reflect at all what we see today in the world. Just to give you an example, as far as the citizens of the country in which we are today, I don't want to ruin their days, obviously, but I have to tell them that according to the Charter, they are citizens of an enemy state. This could not be changed. It's still there, like in Japan, Germany, Hungary, etc., etc. And there are many other issues that are similarly less complicated than the one we're talking about, the Security Council. But the general attitude in the Council, in the United Nations, is that as long as we do not solve each and every problem, difficult or less difficult, and we take a decision ad referendum on that given problem, if we manage to go through all these questions hanging in the air, at the end of it, we can take a decision on changing. Obviously, we are far away from that issue, but the fact is that we are talking about this means that the world realities are knocking on the doors of the United Nations. But as I told you, there are easy things that we could do very easily. Let's say delete the 2 chapters in the Charter of the United Nations which deal with the colonial territories, and I could go on and on. For instance, when it comes to if a UN member suffers an armed attack by another UN member, then we have to do this and that. They are speaking about armed attack in 2025. Can you imagine that the only way to attack a country? So this means that obviously the document of 1945 is far away from what we see today in the world. The most sensitive issue is, and everybody recognizes this, is the Security Council. As long as the Security Council decisions are built on the consent of each and every Security Council member, you have to work to have all the 5 saying yes to whatever comes up as far as the Security Council. Today, I do not see any hope from this point of view. Otherwise, we could have done a lot of things before. But the fact that this is very much on the minds of people is shown, by the way, by a General Assembly resolution some time ago, recently, which says that if a Security Council member casts a veto on whatever question comes to on the table, then within 10 days, that country that cast a veto must appear before the General Assembly and has to explain why it cast a veto. This is something that 20, 30, 40 years ago we could not have imagined. This is a visible example of how the General Assembly public, I mean all the 193 countries, see that we have things to be changed. But for this to happen, you have to have all the yeses of the permanent members. So this is why I see that we have to do this. And at the end of this explanation, I would also end another sentiment, which obviously makes it even more complicated. If the issue of the Security Council membership, the way it works, comes to the forefront of the attention of the Security Council, I do not see how we can do a step forward. Even if you look back, you will see that in crises, in conflict situations, for instance, and the one that happened so close to our borders with the dissolution of Yugoslavia, it shows that the lack of unanimity and also the slowness, the bureaucracy of how the United Nations Security Council team actually works makes taking the decisions in a very, very difficult way. I do not see this, but this is the only way to avoid, to close our eyes to what is happening in the world. We have to accept that the realities of today are radically different from the earlier times. And then the last moment, the last idea, if we do this, I can predict that the Security Council activities will be much more complicated than before, because we might have several permanent members, several non-permanent members, and knowing today's situation in the world, it will be, yes, even more difficult to take the right decision at the right moment to avoid conflicts, to avoid bloody conflicts in the world. We have seen this in the case of a simple, quote-unquote, Security Council resolution when it came to Yugoslavia. There we saw, and that was a frustration, obviously, including for us who happened to sit in the Security Council at that time. People were not ready, were not efficient enough, we were not informed about what's happening on the ground. If we have a larger Security Council, this issue will become even more difficult and more, threatening in a way to help the United Nations to take the right decision at the right moment. So we will have to look ahead with a difficult path that is waiting for all of us. Thank you.